Wow.
Right? So in the middle
At
of this
25,
mess,
you're living this crazy lifestyle, this party lifestyle, but yet at 25, 3 restaurants. Where did that come from? And how did you start that? The first restaurant, let alone the third one.
I was amazed. So when that bug was planted and I came back to the States, I just went on this obsession to try to figure out how to start a business. And the first thing that I did was I started with, at that time, it's crazy to think about now, with what I was doing, because I was in the restaurants, working the restaurant. So that was the only thing I knew. I'm like, well, I'll just start a restaurant. And then I started really going around. So actually, let me say the timetable. So I was in Vegas for the first 2 years after I got back from college. And then I went back to LA for a year. I lived in LA, tried to pursue some different dreams and some ideas there. I was not in LA for very long. I think I was there for 10 months and came back to Vegas. And that's when I really started ramping up this concept of building businesses. And so whether I worked in a restaurant or in the nightclub or I was just around, I was always going to the wealthy person that owned the restaurant, literally, when they would come in, or I would go sit at the casino bars at the Wynn at the time and buy an iced tea because I had no money and sit next to somebody that looked wealthy. And if they looked wealthy, I'd sit down with them and I'd have a conversation. I'd be that random kid just sitting there. And then I would also always approach the owners of the different businesses that I worked in as this bus boy that was like, hey guys, I have a really good business idea. Would you like to sit down and can we talk about it? And you got some of that, yeah, whatever. No. What, all that nonsense. And it never changes, by the way. And then eventually one of the guys finally was like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, oh, wow. So he and I started working some stuff and building our relationship at a fairly young age, for me anyway. And turns out he ended up partnering with me. And then in this process, we raised money. And my best friend to this day, David, was helping us look for different restaurants that were available, whether we were going to rent out a unit, build it out ourselves and start our own brand. But in that process, a guy here in Vegas that owned 2 chicken restaurants, it was chicken fingers, wings, beer, wine, and burgers was the, sort of the bread and butter.
Okay.
No pun intended there, of the menu. And so he was wanting to get out. We were wanting to get in and buy something. And so he sold them to us basically at a fire sale. So that's how the first 2 came to life. And, in that time frame, we became the owner of 2 restaurants. And then the same guy that sold me those restaurants, he and I started building a relationship. And then I had another friend at the time that also had run into some money. And so myself, the other friend, and the guy that sold me the first 2 restaurants all partnered on a 3rd restaurant and started that one from scratch. So basically for 3 or 4 years, I'm hustling, I'm grinding, I'm trying to figure out what my business opportunity is going to be. I'm thinking about stuff on the Strip, like literally front and center for Vegas Boulevard. I'm thinking about this, and all of it just kept going. And then the chicken opportunities came for those restaurants. And then the milkshake shop was the 3rd one right after that, all in the same time period. And then within about a year and a half, they were all gone.
Wow. A year and a half. So,
yeah, I had no fucking idea what I was doing.
18 months, you went from no restaurants to 3 restaurants to no restaurants, right? Like
to bankruptcy, to losing my girlfriend, to moving back in with my dad, to drinking bottles of Jack Daniels to the face by themselves in one night. Just going back to that place of like, wow, I have to go backwards again, right? I have to go to the place that I was trying to get away from. And I still hadn't resolved my issues with what was holding me back, which was really more of a personal thing, less than it was the drug or the alcohol. So I always tell people this is important. The drug or the alcohol is a substance. It is what it is, but the control comes from me. I'm the one that decides to go pick it up. I'm the one that doesn't have the mental fortitude to say no to that. I'm the one that hasn't worked on myself well enough to avoid it and turn it off and say, nah, I'm good. So anyway, that's an important point. The substance isn't forcing you to take it.
Sure.
You're deciding to do that. So I go back into the real world after that happens. I think I'm 26 now, 26, 27. I go get a job at the airport right here, which McCarran, everybody's been to McCarran International here in Vegas, as a food and beverage manager. And boy, am I fucking miserable. Like, it's just miserable. I'm just slap dicking. I hate it. I don't have my girlfriend anymore, who at the time I cared about dearly. I'm miserable. I'm back in this stupid job. I eventually get fired from that job. I go out, I get my girl back crazily because I go fight for it. And then I start selling drugs. and I started collecting unemployment because I had a lot of people that were still coming to Vegas and they all wanted me. They would call me because they knew they were already coming to Vegas in this process, because I had started working at the nightclub by this point. So I was already building the relationship. So then they were coming to Vegas and talk about an entrepreneur. They're like, hey man, I need some stuff. What you need? Cocaine, Molly. Okay, I got you. It's going to be this price. I knew I was buying it at X. I was selling it for Y, and I was building it in there because it's safe. And you have no idea. People wanted the drugs more than anything, because without that, it was not going to be a Vegas experience. So I was able to fucking mark the price up like a maniac and make some good money to take care of daddy.
Manny provided the Vegas experience.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And then
wow.
And then once I gave it to him, then I started, snorting, popping it with him. And so we had a good old time, man. So it was the best of all worlds in those days, depending on your perspective. So anyway, that being said, so that kind of cascaded. I'm now 28, 29. I'm still floating between different jobs. I tried a few different new businesses. And then right around the end of 2015, right before my 30th birthday, man, is when I decided to get sober. And that, my man, is when it all changed. It was all changed at the time of sobriety. And from there, man, it just took off like a rocket ship, because it was basically me going from this addiction of, okay, I'm now, I'm so having fun with the partying, the going out, the drugs, the gambling, the drinking. I just redirected it back to learning and growing and figuring myself out. And that became the new obsession. And it hasn't stopped. It won't stop now. It's just compulsively in me to learn and grow and figure things out, despite how hard it is. You have no idea. And I'm not saying that from a putting it on you in terms of you've not been through this. I don't want to say, actually, let me roll that back and say it differently. People have ideas about this stuff that have gone through it, but for the lack of the usage of the language, the amount of reinvention that has to happen from a former conditioned self that has gone through 30 years of life and who knows, countless amounts of ways where you've become this thing for 30 years. And then to go back and say, okay, I'm stripping all that out. I'm going out to really recreate myself, and whatever it takes, I'm going to go through that process. That's the journey that I went on, man. And then from there, because of that decision, it got really sexy. I was still promoting. I got sober. I was still promoting and hosting the nightclubs, but I stopped doing the drinking. I stopped doing the drugs.
So you're still subjecting yourself to that environment and around those things, but you had said, I'm done.
That's it, man. Straight up. Yeah, I was actively around those people, and they were actively doing that stuff, drugs, drinking. They would like, hey, a lot of people didn't believe that I was committed to staying sober. They're like, yeah, right, bro. You're going to last 2 weeks. You're going to be back.
Yeah, that's
like,
a ton of temptation, right?
Totally.
I mean,
but you know what, man? I was so over that self, that person. I was so disgusted with him that I didn't want anything to do with it. And so a lot of people asked me, how'd you do it? And I said, man, it just became something from years and years of loss that piled up. And then after that much loss, you get to a point where you're like, hey, man, I don't want to live like this anymore. There's got to be something better. And so, and plus I already knew I had knack, dude. I was always hustling in the middle of all this stuff. I was always pursuing the entrepreneur dream. I was always pursuing a life on my terms. I was always pursuing the freedom, right? I didn't like being told what to do. I didn't like having bosses. That was not for me. So I was already there. I was just holding myself back. So when I decided to get sober, man, it liberated me in a way where I could go figure who I was out and start working that process. And then because of that, I went and traveled the country for 2 years, speaking on stages without any experience, never having done it before, literally.
Where did those opportunities come from?
So I met a big speaker in Vegas, and I really believe that the power of, because it's happened, and so it's really tricky. You're in a happy place in your life, and you find a path because you're thinking and you're cooperating properly with what you want in your life and what the actions are that you're taking. And then in process, you go and you start eclipsing where you were, you get to these new levels. And then you realize that you have to re-engage that person for yourself and fight back at that next level, because naturally you want to go back and start thinking about what didn't work and why you're behind and what's not working in this. And so you could roll the tape back and end up getting stuck again in what you kind of were before. So you're always engaging in that fight, that dog fight, to outpace your previous self and stay there so that the negative lessens itself. So now I'm answering your question in this way because I would go to the Mandalay Bay every night and I was promoting nightclubs, and every day I would get up and I would go, this is going to be the day that I'm going to meet this speaker, because that's what I wanted to do at that time. Sobriety came. I started working on myself. I started going to the seminars. I started listening to the podcast. And I was like, I want to do that because I had great stories. So here's where the story comes in, because at the time, everybody was like, dude, if you got a story, you got to tell that story. If you got a story, every stage, every event I went to, the biggest speakers were like, you got a story. I'm like, they sold me, man. I'm like, I got a really good fucking story. Like, I got Vegas at that. People want to know about Vegas. I got some good shit. And so crack, right? I got that crack. They're going to want to come back for it. And so I decided that that was going to be my next path because it was just speaking to me. And I'm like, oh, this is definitely it. Like, I got sober. I have the story from the background. Oh, this journey's setting itself up very nicely. What do I need to do? Write a book, start podcasting. And then in that process, to get to that point, though, I was actively thinking in my head that I needed to get around the right people, and the right people would bring me up to the next level like that. So that became my mission at that time, which was get around the right mentor, let him bring me into his world. And man, I would go to that hotel every night and I would think about, well, there's basically a convention a day here, which literally at the Mandalay Bay, there always were.
True.
Anybody and everybody could come walk through this hotel. And because I was promoting, I could walk around the hotel wherever I wanted. And I was paying attention to who was there. I was very aware. And one day I'm going to be on this floor and some guy's going to come in and he's like, all right, kid, I like you. What do you want to do? Let's go. And sure enough, man, that happened. That one night that I met one of those guys and he came in, I saw him dead on. I was like, I know you. I love your work. I think you're doing amazing stuff. You know, so he's like small talking with me, and he invites me to his event the next day, highlights me at his event the next day. I'm like, oh shit, is this happening? And then about a month and a half later, after a few more steps, he basically said, come on, kid, you know, let's go out and, you know, do some great things. And I'm paraphrasing there a little bit because I don't want to take all the time on this because I'll be here all day on it. But the idea was the intent there of me finding that opportunity at that time and putting in the work to support it really allowed me to get in that position to capitalize on that. And from there, that's when I went off and started traveling the country speaking. Then I came back to Vegas, started working at a company here because I wanted to learn how to sell on the phone, because I was learning how to communicate on stage for 2 years and I was learning how to sell on stage. And then I wanted the other skill of picking up the phone and learning how to make a phone call and close a deal, because I was still nervous in doing that at that time. And so I went into that company, did incredibly well right away, started calling into really large size companies, talking to all the decision makers in the C-suite. And then I pivoted in that company and started running the celebrity division, calling into Hollywood, securing deals with celebrities, agents, managers, working that whole thing for about a year as part of that transition. And then after that, basically went on a journey to start to work on my own stuff. Similarly, around the same time, at that time in 2020, met my now wife. We started dating long distance. After 8 months, we moved in together in Vegas, and then that was hell. And so you talk about like transforming, moving into a small place together on Las Vegas Boulevard, and me being comfortable being in a long distance relationship, but then having to come face to face when I'm still not who I need to be. Dude, if you knew what my wife went to and through to be with me, you'd call her crazy, because any woman would have left my ass lots of times. But we fought through it. And again, man, because of both of our commitments and our desires to be better, we were able to withstand all those storms and come out on the other side. And look, we still have our bickering matches and we still disagree on certain things, but we're foundationally set on a grouping of values and principles. And then in that, I kept trying to refine my entrepreneur identity, which was hard. And so, yeah, man, whether it's like, you know, you think about all this stuff and it gets exciting and there's these ups and these downs, but then you look back in your life and you're like, man, I've come a long way. I've done a lot. I'm excited about it.
Definitely.
And yeah, without all that journey, without all that adversity, without all that challenge, without all that stuff, you don't think back in 50 years, when I'm 90, you don't think back at that time and go, fuck, I wish I would have did something more. I wish. And that for me really gets into me, man. I don't agree with that. Let's play it safe and let's wait and let's do these things later. It's like, no. And I'll final this thought here before you transition with my monologue here that's been going on for about 25 minutes. The reason why I'm so urgent in my time is because...
Hi, I'm Marc Thomas, founder and CEO of Current Tech Solutions and Cyber Guardians. If you or someone you know could benefit from our cutting-edge IT and cybersecurity services, we'd love to help. Our expertise in securing your business with AI precision ensures that you're protected and empowered to thrive. Reach out to us today to learn how we can secure and elevate your business.